All right, we are live. So, very, very happy good afternoon to you all, and welcome to NYS Power's Women's Equality Wednesday Google Hangout. I'm Wendy Amangwal-Wark, the founder of Inclusion Strategy, and I'll be moderating today's panel, our public conversation on representation at all tables. Today's format is meant to invite questions and comments from you. So tweet your questions using the hashtag #PowHerList or click on the Google Hangout questions over on the side of your screen. And after the event, the Hangout will be available on nyspowher.org. So you can share this with other people and, again, look at questions and answers at that time. NYS Power is an inclusive statewide network committed to securing economic equality for all New York women. Each Wednesday through this year's election, we're holding a conversation on key issues which affect women's economic equality. This week, we're using our time to talk about representation at all tables. Please note that NYS Power is strictly nonpartisan, and the comments of our guests do not represent those of the organization. Today, we have an amazing panelist with us. Tiffany Dufu is Chief Leadership Officer to Leave and Launch Team Member to Lean In. Serena Fong is Vice President of Government Affairs with Catalyst, and Mecca Santana is the New York State Chief Diversity Officer. Let me give you some context before we get to our guests. Here it is, 2014, and Benchmarking Women's Leadership Report has provided us with some, let's call them, interesting statistics. In academia, women represent more than 55% of the most prestigious awards, despite holding only 29% of positions. In law, women were 47% of the graduates, yet only 15% of equity partners and 5% of managing partners in 2012. In business, women held 51% of professional and managerial positions, but only 15% of executive positions and 13% of board of directors seats in Fortune 500 companies in 2013. And in politics and government, 15% of the seats in the United States Congress. Co-sponsor more bills, bringing more federal spending to their districts than their male counterparts. And similar to other states, the New York State Legislature is only 22% female. Our panelists are not going to just talk about what was and the barriers to representation that we all face, but more importantly, what can we do and what can you do to create change and increase our representation at all tables? So, Tiffany, I'm going to start with you. Can you share a recent experience that you've had that inspires and informs the work that you do specific to girls and their representation at all tables?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. My life's work is advancing women and girls. It's pretty much why I'm on the planet. So I'm thrilled to participate. And I was especially thrilled because I had a recent experience over the past few days. I've been in Salt Lake City, Utah at the National Girl Scouts Convention. I was invited to serve a role on the national board. I was at the same time reading the autobiography of Juliet Gordon Lowe, who was the founder of the Girl Scouts. She founded it in 1912, and she was very committed when she founded this organization that girls would be at the center of it and that it would be girl-led. And I was very struck over the past few days about how that ethos and that commitment still lives in the Girl Scouts today. We were told as nominees for the board to only spend $40 on a meal because we had to preserve girl dollars. Every speaker from the stage spoke to the girls, and I was particularly struck when a 14-year-old Girl Scout got up on the convention floor, and mind you, there were 6,000 delegates, and argued against an amendment that the board had made to the bylaws, and after some pretty intense debate, her amendment to that amendment actually passed. And I was struck because it wasn't cute. No one on the delegation floor was laughing or saying, oh, how adorable that she has the courage and the wherewithal to get up and do this. It was pretty much the status quo, and I could tell very much the norm that girls have power, that girls are strong, and that girls are prepared to lead. And when I came back to the team at Levo League, one of the things that I spoke about is how I feel that a lot of our success in focusing on the next generation of leaders, particularly Gen Y women, is in part due to the fact that we keep them at the center. And I just want to remind us that when you keep women at the center, we can do amazing things, that we have all the capacity and everything that we need to do it.
That's amazing, and I'm definitely inspired. And as a former brownie, I'm proud. But I want to know, can you share some? Can you share some of some other best practices, some of the examples of policies, local or otherwise, that have expanded opportunities for girls in STEM and other areas of underrepresentation?
Well, I mean, the policies that have done the most are ones that have to do with flexibility when it comes to work, getting paid sick leave, policies that really create equitable environments, whether it's in, school, whether it's Title IX, and of course we all know that we have far more to do on both of those fronts. But quite frankly, policies that support families are policies that support girls and helping to them provide them a place where they can bring their full selves to the table.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we always need to remember the connection, the correlation between policies, as you say, that affect families and boys as well as girls. We certainly don't want anyone to miss an opportunity or anyone to be denied equity. We just want to expand that and make it equitable in the true sense of the word. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Serena, I have a question for you now in terms of representation. Why is representation important, both personally and on a much larger scale?
Wendy, thank you so much. And as Tiffany said, I appreciate the invitation to be here. I think this is an amazing platform and amazing group to be with. It's just a really nice opportunity. And so in terms of why representation is important, it really builds off of what Tiffany was just talking about. And it's about the whole issue of fairness. It's one of the reasons why representation is important to me and why I work at Catalyst, which works to advance women in the business world and have them be represented equally in a corporate environment, is because of a couple of reasons, and the big one being that it's fair. It's what everybody should have the opportunity to do. Everybody should have some kind of representation at that table so that people can, not only you can advocate for yourselves, but also advocate for others. One of the things that leads to this is the business case. We see that, in the research that not only that we've done at our organization, but others have done, we see that there is that if you have fair representation, equal representation, and much to what you just said, this is not about having it be all women and all girls. It's about equity in terms of representation. You get better business. You get better decisions. There is better profits that you make when you have equal representation in companies. It's a combination of not only fairness but also better business, which leads to a better economy, better society, better opportunities for everybody.
Yay. And I love that, because you start here with what's fair, and then you say, wait, this makes great business sense. You want to make more money, you want to be more successful, be equitable. It's a pretty simple equation, and I think when we can offer up simpler messages around representation and equity, we can diminish some of the resistance that might exist. And so I think that leads to the next question I want to ask you, which is, how can we inspire people? I go back to Tiffany's recent experience, definitely inspiring for all of us. Do you have a way to help us inspire corporations, organizations, nonprofit and otherwise, to increase representation on boards? How can we inspire them into it?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we do often here at Catalyst is are on that particular issue of women on boards, which is, I mean, it's near and dear to my heart. It's near and dear. It should be near and dear to everybody's heart, frankly. When you, again, I go back to the business case, and when you see what kind of results you get when you have equity on a board. Because a board, the corporate board, is where you have where a lot of the decisions are made in terms of what you do, how you act, who's in charge, and that which has major implications on everybody who works at the corporation and your business itself. So with that, you have when you have more women on boards, we always try to show that, look, if you do that, you're going to have better business. Again, not only in terms of actual dollars, but another area that I think is really interesting in terms of reaching out to the community and making change through having equal representation on boards is that we found, and others have found, that there's an increase in CSR, in corporate social responsibility, and actions and behaviors around sustainability and helping out the community when you have more representation of women on board and equal representation of women on boards. So, I mean, I just think that if the board and a corporation really wants to improve their bottom line, if they really want to make change, if they really want to be the best, then they need to really look at what's happening on their boards.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Serena. So speaking of inspiration, Mecca, my first question is personal. It's how did you come to embark on the path of diversity and inclusion?
Sure. Well, thank you, Wendy. I'll kind of piggyback on the comments of my fellow panelist participants today and saying this is a phenomenal venue to kind of talk about issues that are so important, so relevant. And so for me, this was a very personal journey. Professionally, if you talk to colleagues who knew me 10 years ago, they would be amazed that I was the Chief Diversity Officer, because I began my professional career as a criminal prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office. But even then, I was a sex crimes prosecutor. I was a violent crimes prosecutor. I was a domestic violence prosecutor. So I was focusing in areas dealing with women who had been victimized, who were very vulnerable, who, especially in the domestic violence context, who were faced with situations where economics were always an issue. Family security was an issue. Shelter was an issue. And so I was always an advocate for those who needed advocacy the most. And that really stemmed from my childhood growing up with a mother who was a teacher, who always taught us about right and wrong and fighting the good fight for those who can't fight for themselves. I transitioned into this work out of law enforcement about 8 years ago when I was given the opportunity to be the executive director for the Civil Rights Office at the New York City Department of Education. And I'll tell you, when initially presented with this opportunity, I was reluctant. It wasn't law enforcement based. I was more into a prosecutorial investigative field. But the more I thought about it, the more I said, what motivates me, what drives me, is the sense of being an advocate. It's the sense of getting up in the morning and putting on the white hat and doing justice and fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. And whether I was doing that in a criminal context or in an employment law civil rights context, it was the same fight. And so I transitioned kind of seamlessly. And what I learned is that instead of being, in my former capacity, more reactive to issues facing women, I had the opportunity to be more proactive, to work on policies and procedures to try to stamp out discrimination in the workplace, to work on sexual harassment trainings, to make work environments safer for everyone. And so, you know, ultimately it was that work that kind of led me to my current position, where I get to engage in this fight on a statewide level every day, not just on basic issues of discrimination, civil rights, but also economic independence through our minority and women-owned business programs. So I really have come full circle in being kind of a champion for all things justice, inclusion, equality. You know, that is the playpen. While I have jumped around in different realms, it's always the same fight.
Well, thank you. And I know that you are doing great work for all of us, and I'm thrilled, because I think we need to, again, if you want to inspire people, show on all levels what's the link between the work that all of us do, because there are several common denominations. So I you say, where are these opportunities to create change? So our audience, I'm asking you now to think about what is it, Tiffany, that you might recommend that our audience can do today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mecca. I was just really struck by how the credibility that you have of being someone who's been in the trenches with women. I'm not sure that very many of us could be in the trenches the way that you really have, especially for women who are underserved and really disadvantaged. But one of the things I would say that we can all do is reach back. So, we might not all be a prosecutor, but we can mentor a girl. We can take the time to help a young woman achieve clarity through guidance and encouragement. All of us are in roles and positions in which we should have a group of women that we're committed to and that we're supporting and advancing their leadership. So that's one thing that I would say. The second is that we all, for the most part, are a part of organizations that really need to have cultures and environments where women can bring their full selves to the table. I was in Colorado some time ago at a mentor's home, and she has this really beautiful pond in her backyard, and I was feeding the fish that were in the pond. And I asked her, what kind of fish are these? And she said, oh, they're goldfish. And I looked a little confused. I said, what kind? And she said, those little 25-cent goldfish that you buy, at the state fair. And I said, but they're huge. I mean, they were about at least a foot long. And she said to me, she says, goldfish stay small because when you get home, you put them in a fishbowl. She said, but if you put them in a pond, they'll grow to the size of their environment. And I had such an aha moment because I thought, here I am and here we all are in sometimes fish bowls for women. We're in places where women's ambition, their confidence, their talent really can't thrive because we're not providing them the opportunities, and also because we're pretending that they're meritocracies when they're not. So helping women to really, spending time with them, helping them to navigate their environments and demystify them, especially when you're in a position of leadership, I think is one of the most powerful things that we can do to make sure that more of us are represented.
Fantastic. I love that. Demystify. Because again, I've been in this world for a long time in terms of starting out in EEO and working my way up into the D&I arena. And, numbers can tell interesting stories. And I've had many employers say to me, oh, Wendy, we've done such a hard job searching for women and promoting, and we just can't find them anywhere. And I look around and I see women all around me who are competent and capable and certainly qualified, and I'm a bit baffled. So I love your word, demystifying. And I think for all of us, will help our kind of a collective success in terms of our endeavor. And Serena, this next one for you, how can we create or advance, and I'm going to emphasize the word effective public-private partnership around this goal of representation?
Wendy, thank you. That is such a critical question, I think, because, and it's something that I've been thinking about not only in the work that I do here, that I think that everybody is doing and that is aspiring to. It's important because that phrase public-private partnership is one that people like to use and say, but what I am always pushing myself to look at and challenging myself and my colleagues is, what does that mean? What comes about that? I think that we need to move beyond the rhetoric. I think that we need to really, and it goes back to what Tiffany just said about demystifying the barriers and these issues. It's about really looking at putting some meat behind the phrase. And so I think that it's something that when you go to form these kinds of partnerships, you do things like you give a platform such as this one, to go out and and make change and to force this kind of partnership. I mean, I think it's this panel alone is a great example of a public-private partnership, because you've got Mecca from the public policy world. You know, you have Tiffany, you have me from from our various worlds, and all coming together to talk about and that's, I think, is also critical, is communication and talking about what this all means. I think that the panel also works on a different level in terms of the public-private partnership, because I think that we're all role models. I mean, all of you are role models for me. All of you are meant. I'm getting so much just from being part of this experience. So I think so in that sense, it doesn't even have to be huge. It can be something as simple as getting people together and having very honest, open conversations.
Fantastic. And the word honest is definitely critical. And I'm my blog, I'm constantly ranting about get rid of the buzzwords and the rhetoric.
Right.
And let's just have some direct communication about this. Doing this a long time, and Beverly and I and others in our generation talk about this. We want to see change. We don't want to just have tea parties and talk about it. And but that requires honesty and direct communication. So Mecca, here's a direct question for you. Do you see a future where WMBE programs are not necessary? And for those in our audience who don't know the acronym, it's Women and Minority-Owned Business Enterprises, and every government entity has programs that are designed to create a more level playing field economically by setting aside a portion or percentage of governmental contracts for women and minority-owned businesses. I'm a certified WMBE, and that should help me to work. It hasn't really much, but it should. The idea, the concept is there. So the question is, do we see that equity be achieved and the necessity for these programs being diminished, Mecca?
Sure. It's funny because I get asked this very same question every now and then, and I say to those people who pose it, you would assume that these programs were born out of thin air, that one day someone woke up and said, well, let's just give 20% of our contracting and procurements to women and minorities. No, these programs were born out of necessity. They were born out of the need to remedy past discrimination. They were created as a remedial measure to the inequality that exists in the business field. We know that women and minorities had been shut out of, construction, IT services, all of these areas historically, and that playing field wasn't going to equalize on its own. It required the intervention of not only public policy and work with the private sector, but legislation to really come in, and strong leadership like our Governor Andrew Cuomo to come in to say this is unacceptable, and we as the state have an obligation to make sure we provide equal opportunities for all of our small businesses out there. And that's what this program is really all about. Through our activities, through our robust outreach, through our extensive certification process, through our support services and loan programs and business mentor programs, and our outreach efforts. We have a phenomenal program here in New York State with a governor who just announced that the goal now is 30% of our state procurements going to MWBEs. That's the highest in the nation. But again, it's because we understand that equality is not going to be something that is organic necessarily. It doesn't happen on its own. You need advocates. You need people who are dedicated, who are focused on these issues all the time. Theoretically, if we ever got to a point where equality had been reached and the playing field had been equalized, then of course we would like to see these programs would no longer be relevant or necessary. I joke with people that I'd like to work so hard that one day I work myself right out of a job. That's the ideal situation. That's not the reality. It's not the reality in a world where we know discrimination still exists. We know people are still being denied opportunities. You just look around. You look at the fact that women still make less than men. You look at the fact that sexual harassment and sex crimes are still rampant on college campuses. until some of that is dealt with, and until where we have some measure of control when it comes to the economic justice realm and making things better for women and minorities, you will always have programs like this, and you should always have programs like this. And they deserve the full support of our elected officials and the private sector, because there really is, as we were speaking earlier, the private sector has an obligation in this field as well. And what we have seen is them also stepping up to say, we understand why procurements with MWBEs are just as important. What can we do? How can we partner? How can we make a stronger economy for everyone?
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And yes, I agree. It would be wonderful if I could retire and go write a novel. But I'm not that idealistic yet. But I'm optimistic, because I think again, and Serena, thank you so much, because I am learning from the three of you. I think that it is critical that we co-mentor each other, that we knowledge share and support and encourage. It can become discouraging, and for those of you who are watching, don't give up. We are definitely all of us, and I will take the risk of speaking for my fellow panelists here. We are all of us better when you do better. We're all of us stronger when you are successful, and we are all of us part of that achievement. So please keep it coming and keep it going. So this last question I'm going to throw out to the three of you, amazing women. I'm going to switch it up. What's on your power list? If you had to focus and say, here's your magic wand. We have these things that we want to dream for, hope for, make happen, create, change. So I'll come back. Hope I gave you time to come up with something.
Well, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's the same thing that, as far as I'm concerned, should be on everybody's list, which is equal pay for equal work and paid parental leave. So much of the challenge of women's leadership and women's advancement is tied to who is going to take care of children. And until we disrupt that, I think that that we have a ways to go. So that's on my list, and I think it should be on everybody's list.
I love it. Yay, it's definitely on mine. Serena, if you had to pick one thing?
Yes, it's very similar actually to what Tiffany just said, which is but it's a little broad, but it does cover, I think, a lot, which is to close all gaps, meaning close the wage gap, close the opportunity gap, and close that leadership gap, because that's what it's all about. It's about equal representation.
Fantastic. So when we're on the subway, we need to mind the gap, but in reality, we need to close the gap.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. And certainly not least, Mecca, what would be the one item on your list?
Sure, and this is something I think about as I look at the bottom of my screen and I see Serena and I see you, Wendy, and I see Tiffany, and it's kind of something I speak to when I mentor young women. It would be unapologetic ambition. To be ambitious about kind of the world we want to create, to be ambitious about our personal goals and aspirations, but to also be unapologetic with regard to those people who would expect from you that you be meek and mild and ashamed or embarrassed about the fact that you are ambitious and you are assertive and you're willing to fight the good fight and make the good argument in a space where we need those champions. This is hard work. We need people who are prepared to kind of lace up the boxing gloves and get in the ring. And so we have to be unapologetic as women about the fact that we are just as ambitious as anyone else, and these issues are too important for us to do otherwise.
Okay, I am so inspired, and I cannot thank the three of you enough. I love that. I want to get my new T-shirt, Unapologetic Ambition, and our ambition is to keep this going and to keep this conversation going with everyone, not just in New York State. When I tweet about these Women's Equity Wednesdays, I want people from all over the world to be tuning in, and I hope that we have participants from all over the world, because we will use your knowledge, as we've been saying, and not limited to any small area. For the NYS Power Network. We thank our panelists. Aren't they amazing? Yay, thank you all. You're amazing. And we've heard some powerful comments, and we've got some very tangible things that everyone can do as a result of this session today. And I hope if you've not asked questions here on the Google Hangout, go to nyspowher.org. Sign up for events, other activities, and ask any questions of any of us. Please reach out. Don't forget to vote on November 4th. Please, please, please have a voting results party. Go vote with a neighbor. Find out if someone up the street needs a ride to the voting place in your neighborhood. Please vote. I think every one of us must do that. Ask your candidates how they are taking responsibility to help achieve the things on your PowHer list, and stay connected with all of us, because it's through these connections that we can be successful. Please join us next week, Women's Equality Wednesday Hangout, October 29, 1 p.m. Eastern. The subject's going to be What's at Stake for Women in 2014. I thank you all, Tiffany, Mecca, Serena, so very much, and also Abby and Bev, and everyone have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thank you.